Struggle keeps you confined, and effort keeps you feeling apart. This audiobook unveils the universal key, the secret that converts the invisible into the visible. Once you claim it, you will no longer have to chase outcomes. Reality will begin to flow toward you. Beyond the thin veil of ordinary life lies a truth so deep that those who discover it live between two worlds: the familiar life they have always known and the life they were always meant to inhabit. You stand at that border now, not by accident but by design. Every book, every lesson, every discipline you pursued led you to this instant. But imagine if the answers you seek were never outside of you. Imagine the key was always within. The universe does not answer to empty slogans or frantic yearning. It moves according to a far grander force, one that sages and mystics have long sensed yet only a few have truly used. This is not about forcing temporary wishes into being or coercing reality to bend to your will. It is about reclaiming the master key, the universal key that turns the unseen into the seen, the formless into form. Your mind is the instrument, not the anxious mind of doubt and fear, but the quiet knowing beneath the commotion. It is in that stillness you discover the doorway to creation itself. This force requires no belief, just as the sun asks no permission to rise. It has always been present, waiting for you to awaken to it. What follows is not a new technique, it is a revelation. You will not receive fresh facts so much as remember a truth that has always belonged to you. Remove illusion, and what remains is power. Release limits, and what appears is infinite. This is the moment to claim the key, and once you do, your experience of reality will shift forever. In the center of a crowded city lived Henry, a man whose shelves bowed under the weight of self-improvement books. Texts on manifestation, spirituality, and success lined his walls like mute witnesses to his relentless search. Each morning he rose before the sun and followed rituals with exacting devotion. Vision boards covered his bedroom wall. Affirmations filled his notebooks. His mind churned constantly with positive statements, yet his life remained stubbornly unchanged, standing like a mountain refusing to yield to the wind. Year after year Henry's resolve ossified into desperation. His smile tightened, and the light left his eyes. Beneath the surface of his carefully constructed optimism lurked a deepening bitterness. On his darkest nights he would whisper, "The universe has forgotten me." Here lies a paradox most people never notice. The very act of struggling to create keeps the energy of struggle alive. When you approach life with desperation disguised as commitment, you declare your separation from what you want, and that declaration becomes your experience. Not because the universe is unkind, but because it mirrors your inner state with absolute precision. Picture someone frantically searching for their glasses while they are already perched on their nose. Their frantic search produces the blindness that stops them from seeing what is already theirs. This is the hidden mechanism that traps countless souls in repetitive frustration. The more they strive, the more they reinforce the separation they hope to eliminate. One evening, exhausted after another day of forced optimism, Henry sat on a park bench. An elderly woman came and sat beside him, and her presence carried a quiet stillness that seemed to soften the air itself. Without turning to him, she spoke words that shifted his world. "You are drowning because you do not realize you are the ocean." He began to explain his routines, his practices, his steadfast devotion, but she only smiled. Something inside him opened, a recognition so profound it took his breath away. For years he had tried to persuade the universe to grant his wishes, like a wave bargaining with the ocean about which way to flow. The simple truth now stood before him: the universe does not answer to effort or desperation. It answers to resonance. When you grasp that you are not separate from the force you aim to influence, your idea of manifestation transforms. You are not pushing against reality. You are reality expressing itself. Find a quiet place and settle into silence. Close your eyes and sense your own energy. Notice how it moves and where it gathers. What quality does it carry? Reaching, grasping, striving, or a calm, quiet certainty? Do not try to alter what you observe. Simply witness. In that witnessing lies the first seed of change. Eleanor lived high above the city in a shining penthouse, standing before a wall of trophies, certificates, and glossy magazine spreads that recorded her rise from small-town dreamer to celebrated achiever. Her social feeds glittered with curated moments, romantic dinners, exotic vacations, designer clothes. Yet when she traced a finger over each symbol of success, a familiar hollowness echoed inside. Night after night she found herself hungry for more: another relationship, another promotion, another accolade. Each acquisition brought a fleeting thrill that slipped away like water through her hands, leaving her parched for the next triumph. The truth you have misplaced sits at the core of creation. The outer world is only a mirror of your inner condition. You have been trained to seek power in possessions, in people, in circumstances, but those are mere reflections of the force that has lived inside you since your first breath. This force neither needs to be earned, nor can it be taken away. It simply waits for your recognition like the sun behind clouds, always present whether or not you see it. One night, Eleanor dreamed of a figure of light who approached with a warmth she had always sought in others. "You have always carried the key," the figure said, "and though you never believed it could be yours, it has remained within." Those words stirred an ancient knowing in her, deeper than any carefully formed belief. When she woke, the world looked the same, yet everything felt different. The relentless chase that had consumed her life now appeared almost comic. She had spent decades looking for herself in faces, achievements, and momentary pleasures. The revelation came like a lighthouse: you are not separate from the power you seek. The moment you stop searching outside for something that has always been inside, reality begins to reshape itself in response. Take a journal and write what you most long for. Let your heart speak freely. Then close your eyes and turn inward. How does each longing already exist in you? If you seek love, where do you sense love in your own chest? If you seek abundance, where do you already feel richness inside? Let this inner examination reveal the truth. Everything you pursue is a quality of your own awareness waiting to be acknowledged. In the city, Charles sat cross-legged on his meditation cushion with vision boards arranged like offerings. His routine was exact: morning affirmations, visualization sessions, evenings of gratitude journaling. He had learned every method and followed every teacher, yet his longing remained just beyond reach, like a mirage. Beneath surface teachings lies another level: ancient laws that structure existence itself. The law of attraction is only the beginning of a deeper journey into the mechanics of reality. The law of resonance shows that creation springs not from your actions but from who you are. Your being must vibrate in harmony with your desire. The law of certainty teaches that doubt cannot exist when real understanding replaces it. You do not wonder whether the sun will rise. The law of surrender reveals that control must be released for true power to appear. Many remain stuck in asking and waiting, attempting to manipulate forces they do not yet comprehend. These laws operate with mathematical precision. They will not answer pleading or force. They respond only to true alignment with their principles. One evening after meditation class, a woman stopped Charles. Her stillness suggested she was in full accord with the universe. "You are working so hard to manifest," she said, and then she added, "Manifestation is not about asking, it is about becoming." In that instant Charles felt something shift. All his techniques had kept him separate from what he wanted to be. The universe works by exact principles, not by wishes. When you fully embody these laws, manifestation becomes as natural as breathing. You stop chasing and begin to embody the vibration of fulfillment. In that state you become one with creation itself, and what you seek flows naturally toward you, drawn by the magnetic field of your transformed being. Margaret spent her evenings composing letters to a love that never arrived, and her mornings scanning her phone for messages that never came. She replayed the departures and wondered what she might have done differently. Her heart ached with a hungry longing, and her prayers sounded like desperate petitions for connection. Then one autumn morning, while watching the tide retreat from the shore, she saw something that changed the direction of her life. The ocean never chases the sand, she realized. In that instant she made a decisive choice. She deleted unsent messages, removed the apps that kept her reaching outward, and turned her gaze inward. The universe answers not to the list of things you want, but to the state of being you emit. When you beg for love, you broadcast wanting. When you chase approval, you radiate unworthiness. The law of attraction is precise. It returns to you the frequency you emit. Those who master it understand a counterintuitive truth. Desperation breeds resistance. The more you need something, the more you repel it. The ones who appear to receive easily are often those who need the least. They have cultivated an inner sovereignty and a knowing that transcends need. As seasons shifted, Margaret observed a quiet wonder. The people she once pursued began to arrive naturally in her life, drawn not by her chase but by the completeness she carried within. She no longer chased validation. She embodied her worth like a lighthouse that does not plead for ships to notice its beam. When she released frantic wanting, something deeper awakened. She became the right energy rather than searching for the right person. Desire lost its desperation and transformed into confident attraction. Take a paper and write what you have been clinging to, every hope, fear, and expectation that grips your heart. Light a white or purple candle and center yourself. With calm intention say, "I release my attachment to this outcome. I stand whole within myself." Then burn the paper and watch the words turn to ash. Let the ashes symbolize the conversion of clinging into trust, of need into serene certainty. As the paper burns, feel the load lift and the body relax into an unshakable faith in timing and wisdom beyond your limited sight. James walked the same city streets each day, greeting the same faces, arriving at the same hollow job. His attempts at change collapsed like houses of cards. It felt as though an invisible gravity pulled him back into patterns he could not escape. The truth is, you hold a power greater than conscious intention, your subconscious mind. Hidden patterns that formed over years shape your life far more strongly than the conscious wishes you repeat. These patterns are not imposed on you from the outside. You built them slowly, day by day, through the beliefs you accepted and repeated. The subconscious does not discriminate between what you want and what you expect. It simply manifests the reality that matches your deepest convictions. Reality is a mirror that reflects not your hopes but your expectations. Every relationship, job, and circumstance arises from this inner template. One evening in a cafe, a stranger leaned over and spoke plainly. "You are not repeating the past, you are creating it again." James felt the sting of recognition. His failures were neither random nor fated, but consistent reflections of the stories he told himself about his worth and possibility. The moment he saw that, he gained a precious opportunity to rewrite those stories. Until you bring light to your hidden beliefs and transform them, you will continue to reproduce the same life regardless of your conscious efforts. Before sleep, in the quiet hours, take a journal and ask yourself what you truly believe about a specific area you wish to change. Write without restraint. Let your deeper voice speak. Read what you have written as if it belongs to someone else. These lines reveal the script beneath your life. With this awareness, you can begin to reauthor your inner narrative. Abigail knelt at her altar, reciting affirmations she had spoken 1,000 times. "I am abundant. I am worthy. I am blessed." Her lips repeated the phrases, but her chest remained hollow. The ancients taught a central truth modern seekers tend to forget. The universe answers to energy, not words. Words are mere vessels without the living feeling to fill them. It is not the phrase that moves the world, but the resonance it carries. Two people can speak the same lines and receive entirely different outcomes because the vibration behind their words differs. When you speak of abundance while feeling lack, you broadcast scarcity. When you affirm love while secretly harboring doubt, you issue uncertainty. One evening Abigail sat in meditation and stopped reciting. Instead, she allowed herself to feel. In the absence of words, she touched the sensation of fulfillment. In that silent, embodied state her prayers were complete. She discovered what masters have always known: the universe listens to the language of felt reality, not to rhetoric. Feeling itself is the prayer that moves creation. Find a quiet place, close your eyes, and breathe slowly. Stop thinking in terms of wants and imagine instead that you already possess what you long for. Let the feeling of having it fill you completely. Notice how your body responds. This is the language the universe understands. Stay here until the sensation remains authentic and retrievable at will. Walter stood before an office window in a gleaming tower, his reflection tense and brittle. He scheduled every minute, armored himself with plans, and attempted to control outcomes through meticulous preparation. Yet each quarter success slipped further from his grasp. The paradox is this: the more you attempt to force life into a predictable pattern, the more resistance you create. You cannot command the sea, but you can learn its rhythms and ride them. Control tightens the hand and chokes possibility. Letting go opens channels of intelligence far greater than your limited strategies. One morning, walking along a quiet pier, Walter found an old fisherman with a calm gaze. The fisherman observed him and said, "You look like a man trying to catch fish with his bare hands. The tighter you grip, the faster they slip away. The river flows because you allow it, not because you command it." In that simple metaphor, Walter recognized the prison his need for control had become. Growth comes not from forcing life to obey, but from aligning with its natural current. Take a piece of paper and name what you are desperately trying to control. Feel the burden as you write. Then safely destroy the paper, burn it or tear it, and say, I release my need to control this outcome. I trust the perfect unfolding of my highest good. Let the action symbolize your willingness to surrender and to allow intelligence beyond your own to weave the details. Joseph walked familiar streets and felt stuck in a single timeline of sameness. A stranger in a cafe sat beside him and said, You exist in infinite versions. The Joseph who knows abundance and the Joseph who knows lack both exist. You choose which one to inhabit. The quantum field holds all possible versions of you simultaneously, and manifestation is about shifting into the reality where your desire is already actualized. Most people try to alter circumstances while remaining the same person. No wonder forward movement is slow. Every reality vibrates at its own frequency. To live in it, you must match that frequency. That evening Joseph stood before a mirror and, for the first time, saw not just one reflection but a range of possible selves stretching across parallel lines. The version that lived in abundance moved differently, spoke with quiet assurance, and acted as if success were already complete. You are not escaping your current life. You are stepping into another existing possibility by embodying that person. This is not an act of imagination but an act of alignment. Stand before any doorway, close your eyes, and sense the energy of your highest timeline. See yourself living there. How you stand, how you breathe, the confidence you hold. Then physically step through while saying, I step into my highest timeline where my desire already exists. Feel the shift as you cross that symbolic threshold. Ruth rushed through her days, brushing off peculiar patterns that nudged at her attention. 11:11 on clocks, feathers appearing in odd places. She assumed coincidence, but the world often speaks in patterns and meanings for those who listen. Synchronicities thread subtle guidance through daily life. Numbers, songs, chance encounters, repeated images, these are the soft language of the universe. When you begin to notice these patterns, you enter a stream of meaningful guidance that has always been present. One morning at a cafe, a woman beside Ruth said, Signs aren't rare, awareness is. This struck her deeply. That evening she opened a blank journal and recorded every unusual occurrence. Within days patterns emerged and a map of guidance took shape. The universe does not shout. It whispers through delicate coincidences. By tracking them, you reveal the path already forming for you. Edward watched his carefully built dreams begin to unravel in the quiet hours before dawn. For months everything had appeared aligned. His business prospered, relationships were flourishing, abundance flowed with ease. Then, without warning, it started to fall apart. Investors hesitated, partnerships evaporated, contracts slipped through his fingers. You now stand at a familiar threshold. The moment when manifestation seems to fail often marks the most sacred test. This is the hour where true power reveals itself. The laws that shape reality do not depend on circumstance. They depend on certainty. When the outer world contradicts your vision, it is not necessarily a sign of defeat, but an invitation to exercise unwavering faith. Masters across time have known this. The last barrier often arrives when the goal is nearest. Edward wandered the empty streets, bewildered, until a traveler sitting beneath a street lamp told him, "Most people quit just before the miracle." Those words landed like a bell. He recognized that apparent failure could be a final test, an initiation asking him whether he truly trusted the deeper currents of universal law. He chose to remain steady. Instead of retreating, he stood firm in his knowing, though all signs suggested otherwise. Your journey will place you before similar thresholds. When manifestation seems to falter, you are being invited to demonstrate your certainty. Sacred practice. Bring to mind the manifestation slipping away, breathe into the doubt, allow it to surface, then replace it not through force but through quiet, unwavering knowing. Hold that state for several minutes. This practice deepens your capacity to remain anchored when apparent reality turns against your vision. William sat among a pile of rejection letters, his voice grown hoarse from pleading with the universe. He whispered requests each dawn and sent prayers into the night, hoping some sign would answer. The silence felt unbearable. You have felt that same hush. The missing piece is not better words, but understanding the true language of creation. The universe does not respond to pleas, it responds to resonance. Begging for abundance only confirms lack, pleading for success affirms scarcity. It listens, not to words, but to being. Consider how the sun requires no entreaty to shine. It simply is. This forgotten truth reframes everything. Success is not to be begged but embodied. One evening William met a mentor who shifted his view with a simple image. You do not ask the fire for warmth, you move closer and it gives to you. At that instant William grasped his mistake. He had been speaking the dialect of separation while the universe hears the language of oneness. The path forward is embodiment. Stand before a mirror and speak your desire not as a hope but as a present reality. Focus on the feeling that saturates your body rather than the words themselves. The power lies less in articulation and more in the current that flows through you. Hold this practice until asking fades and commanding through being becomes your natural state. Florence carried worry like a heavy cloak. Each morning brought a tightness in her chest, and each night an anxious racing of thoughts. For years she treated emotions as enemies to be suppressed and stamped out. Yet the ancients taught that emotions are energy in motion, neither friend nor foe, but material waiting for direction. Energy cannot be destroyed, it only shifts form. When you resist fear, you amplify it. When you fight worry, you make room for more worry. The secret is alchemy. Every feeling, even those labeled negative, holds the raw material of transformation. Fear and excitement are energetically similar. Doubt and anticipation can mirror each other in the body. The only real difference is the label you give them. While walking through a garden, Florence met an elder who said, "Fear and excitement are the same river, only named differently." That simple phrase opened new possibility. The butterflies in her stomach before a speech were not an omen of failure, but a sign of impending vitality. Once she learned to rename and redirect the sensation, from dread to eager anticipation, she could harness the energy rather than be mastered by it. Sacred practice. Identify a current fear and locate it in your body. Keep the same physical sensation and change the label to anticipation or excitement. Move your body, walk, dance, or sway, and sense how energy shifts when you direct it rather than deny it. This is emotional transmutation, a subtle craft that transforms resistance into creative fuel. Harold sat among images of luxury, mansion blueprints, exotic destinations, bank account goals, and rehearsed visualizations every day. He believed imagining wealth would draw it near. Yet his balance remained stubbornly small. Visualization is part of the path, but incomplete. The universe responds not merely to your mental images but to the frequency your body emits. If you visualize abundance while vibrating with scarcity, your signal is mixed and weak. Picture a radio tuned to a station that can't reach the frequency you desire. True attraction requires frequency matching. You must become the energetic equivalent of what you want. Once Harold met a silent monk who radiated profound richness without owning material wealth. He learned that true richness is a state to inhabit rather than an object to acquire. The monk's note said, "The wealthy do not pursue money, they align with it." Embodiment is the missing step. For 7 days, move through your day as if your chosen desire is already part of your life. How do you walk, speak, and treat others when abundance is normal? This practice is not pretending. It is energetic attunement. Continue until your physiology and actions match the internal frequency you wish to attract. Esther marked calendar days with hopeful rituals, whispering divine timing like a protective charm. Yet the linear clock is a human invention. In the quantum field, all possibilities coexist now. When you wait for something to arrive, you anchor yourself in sequence and create delay. The secret of instant manifestation lies in understanding that your desire already exists in the eternal present. Those who master this truth do not wait for the future. They step into a present where the desire is fulfilled. A physicist once explained to Esther that observation collapses possibilities into reality. It is focus, not waiting, that gives shape to events. That evening Esther stopped checking calendars and instead lived as if her desire already existed. Within days, previously stagnant opportunities shifted, and doors opened. This is not mystical fantasy but a practical reorientation. Time bends around consciousness. Sacred practice. Sit in stillness and imagine your desire as already consummated in this moment. Hold the felt experience until past and future dissolve and only the present remains. Robert sat in a small cafe watching the world reflect his inner judgments. Every face passing by seemed to mirror the inner critique he carried. Job after job ended with polite rejection. Every relationship withered in the same pattern. He had been taught that reality shapes him, but the deeper truth is that the world acts as a mirror to your inner beliefs. The universe reflects what you hold about yourself and life. When you transform your inner world, the outer shifts automatically. A stranger once asked Robert, "What are you seeing?" That simple question forced him to look inward. He discovered the belief at the root of his difficulties: I am not enough. He began to act from the opposite, self-approval instead of seeking approval. The change was subtle but swift. Opportunities appeared, people began responding differently, and the mirror of reality altered to reflect his new inner stance. Sacred mirror practice. Write 3 recurring patterns you notice in your external life, and identify the belief within you that creates each reflection. This process reveals the authorship of your life and gives you the power to rewrite the script. Dorothy carefully prepared for third dates and scripted messages to secure attention, believing that precise effort would keep her relationships safe. But her attempts only produced suffocation in the connection, and her latest partnership dissolved with the predictable explanation that she had been too controlling. Attachment creates resistance. When you cling to outcomes, you squeeze the natural flow away. The art of having without needing is subtle. Detachment is not abandonment of desire, but the practice of desiring without the pull of need. The less you grasp, the more your life naturally aligns. Dorothy learned this when an elder observed that when you need nothing, everything arrives. She shifted from trying to manage love to simply trusting its natural movement. As she loosened her grip, her presence became a magnet. Sacred release ritual. Sit quietly and visualize releasing your attachment while holding a clear intention. Imagine letting the desire float freely in the field. Repeat, I release my attachment and maintain my intention. Notice the lightness that follows. Franklin watched a friend manifest one success after another and wondered why his efforts produced only friction. He saw the friend move through life effortlessly while his own attempts required Herculean force. The truth he eventually heard from a mentor was blunt yet liberating. It's not what you hope for, it's what you quietly expect. Underneath conscious goals run currents of expectation. Those covert certainties shape outcomes far more than surface-level intentions. Self-inquiry exercise. Close your eyes and ask, what do I truly expect to happen? Note the immediate answer. This raw response exposes your manifesting blueprint. Change the blueprint and the life changes. Virginia noticed how a butterfly gathered nectar without drama. Its power lay in being itself rather than in striving. Influence works the same way. The most magnetic people do not pursue influence, it radiates from their presence. When you stop doing and simply embody your desired state, people and circumstances begin to align around you. Her previous efforts to win esteem had created strain. When she dropped the effort and deepened her presence, everything shifted. Stillness practice. Sit quietly and simply be. Feel how your presence affects the space. Rest in the state of pure being until your energy expands naturally. Albert watched a river find its way around a fallen tree and realized he had been throwing stones into his own stream. Every doubt and limiting belief he entertained tossed ripples that canceled the flow of what he sought. The universe's current is perfect, but your interference patterns, worries, fears, messages of unworthiness, create cancellations. An old mystic observed, you pray for rain while holding an umbrella. Albert finally saw that he had been obstructing his own abundance. The remedy is clearing. Sit with hands over the heart and visualize light dissolving resistance. Speak, I release patterns that block my good. Feel openness returning as blocks fall away. Beatrick filled pages with strategies and evidence to prove possibility, but each new attempt to collect proof only reinforced her doubt. A woman in a cafe said, gathering proof is proof of doubt itself. The final key to mastery is not accumulating evidence but stepping into unshakable knowing. When you reach that state, you no longer seek validation or signs. You simply know. Sacred practice. Close your eyes and inhabit the version of you that has moved beyond needing proof. Become that certainty in body and breath. Live from this knowing, rather than from a perpetual hunt for confirmation. Raymond had pounded on the same heavy oak door for years, knuckles raw from persistent knocking. He performed rituals, recited prayers, and waited for the right moment to enter the life he envisioned. Despite his relentless effort, the door seemed immovable. One morning an old man appeared and asked, "Why do you knock on a door that has no lock?" Raymond froze. He had been trying to open a barrier that existed only in his belief. The more he insisted, the door remained. The old man explained that the door vanishes when you stop believing you need permission to enter. Your persistent asking keeps the illusion of separation alive. The universe does not withhold, it reflects. When you live as though you already possess what you desire, the barrier dissolves because you are no longer signaling lack. Shift from seeking to embodying, and the door will simply be gone. Abigail watched her friend Sarah move through life with a quiet ease that produced effortless results. Sarah never talked loudly about goals or brandished vision boards. She moved as if her intentions were already fulfilled, and events folded accordingly. Abigail could not help but ask how she did it. Sarah planted a seed in the ground and said, "Does the seed shout its intent to become a flower? It simply knows and grows." True power operates in silence. Intention is not merely thought or words. It is a steady state of being so complete it requires no outward performance. When you hold an intention silently and with immovable certainty, it exerts a force that reshapes circumstances without drama. Share less, embody more. The less you dilute your desire with explanations and defenses, the stronger and more swift its unfolding becomes. Victor practiced the habit of living as his future self. Each morning he dressed and moved the way the successful CEO he intended to become would move. Many dismissed him as delusional, but a private alchemy was taking place. Identity precedes reality. The universe responds not to actions alone but to who you are being. When you become the person who already has what you want, opportunities appear to meet that identity. Investors listen with new ears, conversations carry different weight, and doors that were once closed begin to open. This is not pretending, it is an alignment that collapses timelines. The future version of you already exists in possibility. Step into that version now and watch reality reconfigure itself to mirror your new state. Evelyn watched a child reach for a toy without hesitation and realized that certainty is not the same as belief. Belief hopes, certainty knows. The universe mirrors your depth of conviction. Those who receive with ease do not hold tentative faith. They live from an inner certainty that dissolves doubt entirely. Turn your lingering might-ifs into immutable statements. Feel the difference between hoping and knowing. Replace random affirmations with declarations that feel as inevitable as sunrise. This is not about forcing it into existence, but about aligning with a frequency that makes manifestation the natural consequence of your state. Thomas constantly prepared for success as if it were a future event to be negotiated. He scheduled contingencies, rehearsed outcomes, and kept the doors of his ideal life at arm's length. A sage once remarked that reality lags behind your assumptions, and Thomas realized he had been living in preparation rather than possession. The remedy is to live in the end result now. Move through your day as if you already occupy the life you intend. Feel the textures, hear the conversations, notice the manner in which decisions are made. By inhabiting that state, you generate an energetic field that pulls the outer world into alignment. Leonard watched his fledgling enterprise begin to thrive, and then watched it unravel, as if some test had been set in motion. Partners withdrew, funding receded, and relationships frayed. These moments before manifestation often feel like collapse but are more accurately final examinations of your certainty. The universe orchestrates challenges to reveal whether you will hold steady in the face of apparent loss. Those who falter at the test rerun cycles, those who remain unshaken graduate to a new level of power. When circumstances fragment, Hold your vision without clinging and declare that what you want is already unfolding. This posture becomes the evidence that you are aligned. Dorothy stood at her mirror one morning and barely recognized herself. The woman who had chased approval, tried to orchestrate outcomes, and never trusted life had evolved into someone different. Her hunger had dissolved into steadiness. The secret lay not in adding outer tactics but in undergoing an inner alchemy until seeking subsided. When you become the person who naturally claims desired things, you no longer chase. You simply attract. This process is less an acquisition of skills and more an identity shift. Step into the new you and allow your life to be the natural expression of that transformation. Francis had labored under the belief that relentless effort created results. He rose before dawn, executed rituals, repeated affirmations, and wore himself thin. Yet his goals remained frustratingly distant. One day an elder offered a paradox: ease creates speed. When you strain, you build resistance. When you flow, you facilitate momentum. The law of reverse effort teaches that trying harder often delays what you seek. Relaxation is not indifference. It is opening. Practice softening your grip, noticing tension in the body, and releasing it breath by breath. Bring the image of your desire to mind, and imagine it floating toward you effortlessly. Surrender is not giving up. It is making space for something greater to move through you. Henry began to experience the dissolution of separation. Once he recognized that he was not separate from the creative force, everything shifted. Creation is not something outside that you petition. It is the universe expressing itself through you. When you breathe, you are participating in cosmic rhythm. Your thoughts, your awareness, your presence, all are agents of change because you are not a small being negotiating with a distant cosmos but the cosmos itself experiencing itself. This perspective restores power. The barrier between you and what you want evaporates when you realize the source of creation is not external. Practice. Sit quietly and follow your breath, not as an act but as the universe breathing through you. Expand your awareness beyond physical limits until you feel your being merge with the room, the city, and the surrounding world. You are not separate. You are the great field of intelligence operating through a human form. Rest in that awareness until its truth saturates your experience. Eleanor watched the sunrise with an unfamiliar calm. She had arrived at a place where seeking had ended not because everything was acquired, but because she had become what she sought. The transformation is irreversible. Once you remember your true nature, the old constrictions cannot be reassembled. Your perception changes permanently. The self that doubted becomes barely recognizable, as if it belonged to someone else. A friend asked her what changed, and she could only respond that she had remembered who she is. The veil lifted, and there was no going back. This is the power of awakening. It rearranges the inner landscape and, consequently, the outer life. Walk forward knowing that your previous limitations are gone. Each day brings new revelations and deeper application of the laws you now understand. The path of mastery is continuous. There is always another level, another refinement, another field to explore. Whether you create grand legacies or quiet gifts to those around you, the measure of success is alignment. Live with the confidence of someone who knows they are not separate from the creative force. In practice, show rather than tell. Demonstration invites others to remember for themselves, but nobody can be given your knowing. Each person must discover it in their own tempo. In the marketplace of ideas, people often equate effort with merit. Francis had lived that belief for years, convinced that if he simply labored harder, his life would change. He rose before dawn, practiced rituals, and dutifully repeated affirmations with the steadiness of ritual. Yet his results remained stubbornly out of reach. One afternoon he encountered a woman seated beneath an old elm who watched him with clear, unhurried eyes. "Ease creates speed," she said. Those 3 words cut through his conditioning like sunlight through fog. He realized his relentless pushing had been producing a counterforce. Each strain sent a vibration of lack that bounced back and canceled his longings. The paradox of reverse effort became his new teacher. When you soften your grip and release frantic force, the stream of life flows instead of fracturing. Effort can be refined into allowance. Work becomes art when tension melts into openness. Practice this by noticing where your body holds strain. Breathe into the tight places and imagine them loosening like knotted ropes. Think of your desire as a feather and let it float toward you rather than imagining you must chase it down. This subtle surrender does not mean giving up. It means aligning so closely with the current that the current begins to carry you. In the quiet of that alignment, miracles accelerate. Henry's awakening continued to deepen until the sense of separation dissolved entirely. One evening, gazing into a mirror, he no longer perceived himself as an isolated agent pleading with the world. He understood that he is the universe's expression in human form. Each breath is not merely biological, it is an exchange with all life. You are not a small being sending requests into a distant cosmos. You are the vastness experiencing itself through a finite form. This realization reconfigures everything. The actions you take become less like bargaining and more like art. The choices you make are not attempts to force outcomes but invitations to align with the intelligence that animates existence. To practice this, sit quietly and trace the rhythm of your breath until it feels less like a personal function and more like a movement of the whole. Let your awareness widen to the room, then the street, then the city, until a sense of unified presence replaces the old feeling of private struggle. From that field you act differently. Your decisions carry a different weight because they come from a source larger than the small self. Eleanor's dawns had changed too. Once she remembered who she was at the deepest level, the compulsion to chase dissolved. She still had desires and aims, but they no longer felt like hunger. They felt like invitations. She noticed small things shifting without effort, conversations arriving at exactly the right moment, opportunities that had seemed locked suddenly opening, a sense that life was no longer something to be managed but to be participated in. The transformation was not a sudden crescendo but a gradual unwrapping that altered her baseline. Where friction had once been constant, ease now prevailed. That ease was not indifference. It was a refined potency, the kind that commands without grasping. Your path will mirror this pattern. The first phase is unlearning frantic patterns, the second is cultivating presence, and the third is embodying a steady, magnetic force that requires no drama. This is the lifetime work of mastery, and it is also the simplest shift in human history. Remember who you are and let that remembrance govern your moment-to-moment life. There are moments when the universe arranges tests to confirm your new state. Leonard's business had been on the brink of breakthrough when everything seemed to collapse. He could have panicked, as his old programming would have urged him to, but he chose otherwise. He treated the upheaval as a final exam rather than a verdict. In his stillness, he declared that his intention was undimmed by appearances. The ancient pattern repeated: most give up at the threshold, few keep their posture and step into the proof. You will be tested too. When you face rupture, ask for clarity instead of certainty, and stand in the knowing that your vision is not a fragile fantasy but a reality demanding your steadfastness. The difference between those who pass and those who pause is rarely the size of their bank accounts or the polish of their resume. It is the quiet resilience of their interior climate. The people who move through collapse unshaken practice an inner currency of certainty that is independent of external proof. That is what you cultivate through repeated, ordinary acts of composure and presence. In relationships, the law operates in a delicate dance. Dorothy once clutched at love as if securing it required perfect choreography. Her attempts created suffocation rather than intimacy. When she learned detachment, it wasn't coldness but a release of clutching. She could hold her desires and also allow them to unfold. This paradox, desire without need, becomes a magnet. The less you hunt for fulfillment in another, the more naturally others find their way toward the field you inhabit. Love is not a possession, it is a reflection of your inner completeness. When you stand complete, others meet you from that place rather than the needy shadows you once offered. Franklin had lamented seeing others succeed effortlessly while he struggled. He discovered that their advantage was not luck but quiet expectation. They carried an unspoken script: life runs smoothly for us. We operate from possibility rather than from fear. These secret expectations create currents that pull circumstances into alignment. Change your quiet script and change your life. Start by asking yourself what you truly expect. Listen for the immediate reply. That reply is the foundation of your manifesting architecture. If scarcity feels more likely than abundance, your days will prove it. If abundance feels natural, life will conform. Virginia's lesson came gently through nature. Observing a butterfly, she saw how magnetic presence works. The butterfly did not hustle. It arrived at flowers as if invited. Influence is not generated by frantic gesturing. It is emanated from the center. When you cultivate presence, you do not need to persuade. Opportunities and people gravitate toward the clarity you radiate. Stillness becomes a form of authority because the world recognizes congruence. Practice being rather than doing, and notice how momentum begins to build around you. Albert realized his own sabotage in an ordinary picture. Throwing a stone into a river creates waves that bounce and distort the flow. So it is with the energy of doubt, fear, and unworthiness. Your inner ripples interfere with the smooth passage of your desires. The mystic's observation, "You're holding an umbrella while praying for rain," captures the absurdity of asking for what you are simultaneously blocking. The remedy is soft clearing. Visualize a golden light shifting through your chest and speak with feeling, "I am open to receive." This practice dissolves the pattern blotting out your abundance. Beatrick had used external validation as a crutch. She spent evenings collecting indicators that her plans would work: emails, testimonials, signs, yet each discovery served only to soothe an underlying unease. An elder told her, "Gathering proof is proof of doubt." When you move from seeking evidence to embodying knowing, approval becomes redundant. Practice shifting from evidence hunting to presence. Let the sensation of knowing sink into your bones so deeply that external confirmation becomes decoration rather than necessity. The art hidden beneath all these teachings is simple and consistent. Transform the inner baseline and the outer baseline will follow. The tools are varied: journaling, ritual, breathwork, imagined embodiment, but the aim is singular: to reorient your sense of who you are so that the universe has no other option but to mirror that stance. This does not trivialize effort, it reframes it. Rather than grinding against resistance, you learn to work with the intelligence of life. Actions still matter, but their impact is amplified when your being matches their aim. When you practice this alignment, your presence itself becomes an organizing principle. Meetings run more smoothly. Conversations land more clearly. Opportunities arrange themselves in patterns that, before, you might have labeled coincidence. The universe is not capricious. It is consistent. It matches what you hold most deeply. If you have followed these threads, you will notice a subtle shift in how the day moves. You will find that fewer things require force and more things require attention. Quiet attention that invites rather than coercing. Allow your curiosity to lead rather than your fear. Cultivate small rituals that remind you of this new baseline: a breath in the morning to anchor certainty, a moment of silence before answering a message, a gesture that marks your day as oriented from being rather than from needing. In a hurried city, Evelyn continued her practice of shifting from hoping to knowing. She learned that belief and certainty are not the same. Belief clings to possibility. Certainty inhabits inevitability. Watching a child reach for a toy without hesitation, she realized that a child's action springs from a simple, unquestioned knowing. That kind of inner conviction transforms the very architecture of how the universe replies. When you move beyond maybes and into unshakable declaration, the world rearranges around that vibration. Those who receive easily are not merely optimistic, they have anchored their experience in absolute knowing. To cultivate this, find the edges of every lingering doubt and transform those sentences into statements of fact. Feel them in your body as you speak them until they settle like law inside your chest. A man named Thomas discovered the same shift when he stopped living in preparation and began occupying the end state of his goals. Previously, he planned as if success were something to be negotiated in the future, sketching contingencies and hedging bets. Then a mentor remarked that reality lags behind your assumption, and Thomas realized his planning had kept the desired life at a distance. He began to live as if the outcome had already happened. He adjusted his posture, his speech, the routines of his day, and observed how events began to align to that new assumption. This practice is not pretending. It is recalibrating the energetic signal you send to the field so that your external world no longer has a choice but to catch up. Leonard faced a final storm in business. Contracts collapsed, key allies withdrew, and everything that had promised a breakthrough seemed to dissolve. Many would have read these signs as failure, but those who understand the inner mechanics recognized it as a test of commitment. The universe often brings challenges at the edge of realization to see whether you will stand in certainty or fall into fear. If you gave up at the first crack, you would not reach the next plateau. Leonard decided to stand firm. He shifted his posture from panic to quiet certainty and treated the unraveling as a verification test. Within that steadiness, the field rearranged itself, and possibilities that had been hidden found paths to manifest. There is an arc to mastery. The early stage involves unlearning frantic patterns, the middle stage cultivates an inner sovereignty, and the later stage expresses itself as effortless influence. This progression is less about accumulating tactics and more about a deep reorientation of identity. The practices are simple: breath, attention, reflection, but their effects are profound. Change your baseline and you change the world you live in. Dorothy, who had once tried to orchestrate love through endless effort, now encountered a different reality. She had been attempting to bind affection by scripting it into existence. When she shifted toward detachment and allowed herself to remain whole without external validation, relationships transformed. They arrived without the suffocating grip of need. Others met her from a place of mutual fullness. Desires remained, but they came like offers rather than lifelines. The magnetism of completeness drew things that aligned with her new state. Love became natural rather than engineered. Francis learned to refine his relationship with effort. He kept working but removed the frantic energy that had been pushing outcomes away. His labor became a stream of focused action that matched the currents of life rather than fought them. He discovered that momentum built on ease moves faster than momentum born of strain. The law of reverse effort does not negate useful habits or disciplined practice. It simply emphasizes that your interior tone controls the quality of your outer results. When inner tone and outer motion harmonize, your activity becomes catalytic. Henry's realization that he is the universe in human form continued to deepen his choices. Where he once petitioned for results, he now took actions as an expression of creative intelligence. His moves felt less like trying and more like participating. This shift is subtle but transformative. Acts performed from that space carry a different signature. Conversations gain a new clarity. Decisions land with authority because they arise from a place of unified presence rather than anxious calculation. Eleanor's life became a study of irreversibility. Once she remembered her deeper nature, the pull of the old identity faded. The old self, the doubting, hungry self, didn't disappear overnight, but it slowly receded as her new baseline strengthened. She began to notice synchronicities, not as rare miracles, but as ongoing confirmations that the field was responding to a new internal gravity. The change was not about chasing more, but about allowing what aligns to arrive with less friction. A practice to hold close is the ritual of stillness. Each day, even for a few minutes, sit quietly and trace the movement of your breath. Allow your attention to expand beyond the limits of your skin until you feel intertwined with the room, the street, and a larger living field. In that space, your actions become less about getting and more about giving presence. From that place, your life begins to orchestrate itself. People, opportunities, and synchronistic moments gather because your energy now calls them rather than chases them. The universe will test your new state. Tests are not punishments but measurements of fidelity. When the outer world seems to contradict your inner knowing, resist the instinct to explain, plead, or manipulate. Instead, stand in your embodied certainty and ask, how will I act from the place that already possesses this desire? That orientation reveals whether you have truly shifted. In the domain of relationships, practicing detachment does not mean becoming cold. It is learning to love from abundance rather than from need, to offer partnership as contribution rather than as a patch for an inner hole. When you relate from inner wholeness, you communicate differently. Your presence invites reciprocity without demand. This change invites healthier, more resilient bonds. In your work and creative projects, align effort with inner tone. Move with purpose but without the clutch of desperation. Let discipline and ease cohabit. Show up consistently, but do so with a relaxed spine and an open chest. This combination catalyzes results faster than force alone. Remember that a relaxed mastery composes its field. The stuck, strained approach simply scrambles possibilities. Franklin's observation about quiet expectations offers a daily practice. In the morning, ask yourself what you truly expect from today. Do you expect delays, struggle, and friction, or do you expect smoothness, support, and clarity? The answer will set your energetic frame. Choose expectation consciously. The more you repeat an expectation, the more your life will confirm it. Rewriting the daily expectation rewires the script by which your days unfold. Virginia's butterfly taught her to cultivate magnetism through presence. You can practice this by noticing how you enter a room. Are you hurried and needing? Slow down. Breathe. Bring a centered attention to the moment and notice how the quality of the space shifts. As you refine this habit, you will see that influence flows without argument. People listen more readily, doors open more easily, and the field around you conforms to your presence. Albert's inner obstruction became an opportunity for healing. The clearing ritual he adopted was simple but powerful. Place your hands over your heart, breathe deeply, and visualize a warm golden light expanding, dissolving tight knots. Speak, I release what blocks my good. Feel the uncoiling in the chest. Repeat until the pressure softens and the sense of openness returns. The practice is tangible because it shifts the energetic architecture that generated the interference in the first place. Beatrix's transformation from evidence seeker to knower is a testament to how proof is often a mask for doubt. The antidote is to step into presence without external confirmation. When your inner boardroom is resolved, when you decide without needing outside approval, external endorsements shift from necessity to bonus. You move with an ease that leaves you free to act without the compulsion to defend or prove. The through line of these teachings is practical and direct. Your internal state organizes your external life. This is not to deny action or intelligence. It simply places them into context. The quality of your being is the first cause. When you act from clarity, your actions ripple with coherence. When you act from need, your actions generate turbulence. The world mirrors the deepest thing you hold. So steward that inner story. There is a subtler layer beneath technique and ritual where the real transformation occurs. It is not found in more strategies but in a quiet rearrangement of identity and expectation. This level is the difference between someone who appears to get lucky and someone whose life consistently shifts in their favor. Franklin had watched friends move through life with apparent ease while his own efforts felt like pushing against a jammed door. The moment he turned inward and asked what he truly expected, everything began to reorient. Expectation is an invisible script that plays beneath every decision, and it shapes the architecture of your experience with unerring fidelity. If you expect resistance, resistance is what arrives. If you expect ease, ease becomes the pattern. Rewriting these expectations is less dramatic than you imagine and more effective than most hard-won techniques. Start by noticing your default assumptions about money, love, success, and health. What do you silently accept as likely? Are you primed to believe favors are rare and help is hard to find? Do you assume opportunities come through struggle rather than invitation? Those quiet beliefs generate the currents that steer events. Change them, and the currents change. The practice is subtle. Whisper new expectations into your day and treat them as testing grounds rather than fantasies. If you decide that this week will be smooth and supportive, carry that expectation with the same casual authority you used to expect the dawn. Watch for small confirmations. Each one is the universe responding to a recalibrated inner signal. At the same time, cultivate presence. Presence is not a performance. It is an unadorned state of alignment in which your energy no longer broadcasts need. Virginia learned this by watching a butterfly and noticing how it arrived at flowers without haste. Influence flows from being rather than doing. The most persuasive gestures are often silent ones: an open posture, a calm voice, an unclenched hand. When your presence is steady, the world around you begins arranging itself to match that steadiness. Conversations deepen, doors that previously required effort swing open, and an unforced authority emerges that people naturally respect. You will encounter tests. Mastery does not mean the elimination of trials. It means the refinement of your response. Leonard's business unraveling was a mirror for his interior climate. The universe was not punishing him. It was presenting a threshold to measure his fidelity. When everything seemed to slip away, he chose to stand in the field of certainty and watch the world rearrange itself to honor that posture. The key is to treat collapse as an invitation rather than a verdict. When you respond with steady presence and calm curiosity, the storm often reveals hidden passageways you cannot see when you are panicked. This posture shifts your nervous system, which in turn adjusts the electromagnetic field you project, and the field begins to attract different circumstances. In relationships, the principle is similar, but expressed in intimacy. Dorothy's earlier attempts to manufacture affection taught her that chasing produces suffocation. When love is forced, it loses its natural elasticity. The more you clutch, the more the object of your desire retreats. Learning to love from fullness, not from need, rewires how people meet you. You become safer to be with because you are not asking someone to complete what you have refused to complete yourself. This is not resignation, it is sovereignty. From that spaciousness, two people can share without carrying each other's deficits. The magnetism of completeness attracts healthier, more reciprocal connections. Effort reimagined is also a crucial theme. Francis discovered that effort is not the enemy. Frantic, grasping effort is. Discipline shaped by softness opens channels rather than closing them. You can be purposeful and relaxed at the same time. This quality is visible in people who operate with steady momentum. They do not burn out, and their results compound. The secret is to align the inner tone with the outer action so that each step carries a frequency of ease. When the inner and outer harmonize, your activity becomes catalytic. If you must work hard, do so with an open heart and a relaxed spine, allowing your efforts to become a dance with life's intelligence rather than a battle against it. The clearing of inner interference is a practical skill. Albert's revelation at the river made him see how doubt and worry create energetic ripples that cancel the flow of desired outcomes. The simplest remedy is consistent clearing, daily practices that dissolve tension and reset your baseline. Place your hands over your heart and breathe into the chest. Visualize a warm light moving through old knots and imagine those knots loosening. Speak words of receptivity until resistance softens. Over time, this unblocks patterns that previously sabotaged results. The cumulative effect is profound. Instead of waging war against life, your life begins to align. You will also notice that the world seems to speak to you more clearly as you settle into this work. Synchronicities stop being anomalies and become the language the universe uses to direct you. Ruth's practice of tracking signs revealed that the field communicates through patterns. Numbers on clocks, meaningful encounters, seemingly accidental songs. When you pay attention to these threads, they become a thread of direct guidance. This does not mean life becomes deterministic. It means you gain access to a guidance system that was always available. The trick is simple. Notice the small coincidences and record them. Over time, they map a path that mirrors your inner alignment. There is a difference between being someone who is always trying to prove a point and being someone who stands in knowing. Beatrick discovered that proof-seeking is itself an expression of doubt. Accumulating evidence pacifies anxiety temporarily, but never displaces the root insecurity. The antidote is practice in which you act from a place of decided knowing. For example, instead of preparing 50 arguments to prove your competence, go into the next meeting as someone who already embodies competence. The way you enter a room carries authority. When you inhabit the posture of knowing, other people respond as if you already carry the credentials you seek. The concept of living in the end is not fantasy, it is protocol. When Victor began to live as his future self, he was not deluded. He was restating his default operating system. He dressed, moved, and spoke like the man he intended to be, and reality adjusted. This is the essence of the quantum jump. Identity precedes circumstance. The future version of you exists now in possibility. By stepping into that identity, you collapse the distance between present and future. This is not rationalization, it is a practical reprogramming of your field. Acting like someone who has already arrived is a lever that aligns opportunities, people, and resources to meet that identity. You cannot skip the steps of subtle inner work. Many seek a shortcut through external hustle, but the deeper levels of change require the rewiring of expectation, the calming of the nervous system, and the refinement of presence. These are not glamorous practices, but they are the most powerful. They take time, patience, and steadiness. Yet the time invested returns as ease and momentum that your previous frantic efforts could never produce. The final layer to name here is surrender that does not mean passivity. Surrender that shifts outcomes is active alignment, an inner decision to hold the vision unwaveringly while letting the how unfold beyond your control. It's the posture of the artist who completes a masterpiece and then releases it into the world, trusting that it will find its audience. Surrender practiced in this manner frees enormous energy previously devoted to control. It allows the intelligence of life to operate on your behalf in ways you cannot predict. As you continue, resist the temptation to make every moment into a project. Not everything requires optimization. Some of the most transformative moments happen in unplanned conversation, in stillness, in a kind gesture. Hold the big picture but move through days with the humility that small things can rearrange large patterns. Commit to small practices, daily breathwork, 10 minutes of presence, a nightly review of synchronicities, and the habit of shifting your expectation before the day begins. Over months, these minor acts compound into a new baseline. If you find resistance to these ideas, notice where it arises and be kind to yourself. Old patterns are not your enemy. They are familiar rails that once kept you safe. Rewiring takes time and repetition. Give yourself permission to unlearn with curiosity rather than judgment. The universe is not punishing but patient. It meets you where you are and invites you to practice a new posture. There are moments when everything you've been practicing coalesces into a quiet competence that feels inevitable. You begin to notice how the smallest shifts in posture, attention, and tone change entire arcs of your day. The field responds not to spectacle, but to consistency. The person who grows a steady inner life is rarely the one who shouts the loudest. They are the one whose presence quietly rearranges circumstances. This mastery does not rely on dramatic acts but on ordinary disciplines repeated with relaxed fidelity. The margin between struggle and flow narrows until your life moves as a single coherent movement rather than a series of frantic reactions. Consider how you enter a room now. Do you arrive from a place of scarcity, scanning for validation and protection? Or do you step in carrying a calm center that subtly declares your sufficiency? That choice matters. People unconsciously respond to the state you broadcast. When you arrive whole, others meet you from that spaciousness, and cooperative dynamics form naturally. Influence becomes organic because it arises from congruence. You do not have to manufacture charisma. You simply remove the internal obstacles that have masked it. There will be moments when the field seems indifferent, and your patience will be tested. Those are not failures but refinement points. The universe often waits for the clarity of your sustained posture before responding. Temporary silence is not an indictment of your practice. It is an invitation to deepen the quiet you maintain while the world arranges itself. The essential question in those periods is simple. Will you continue to be the person who already has what they desire, even when external signals suggest otherwise? Your answer determines the degree of acceleration you will experience. A pattern many encounter is the trap of proof-seeking. When you ask for validation, you narrow your capacity to act from inner conviction. Proof feels safe because it shifts responsibility outward. If the evidence appears, you can then believe. But this keeps you in a cycle where your inner climate depends on external variables. The alternative is to cultivate an inner seat of knowing so steady that external proof becomes garnish rather than foundation. Practice entering meetings, conversations, and creative acts from the posture of someone who has already arrived. Notice how your energy shifts the dynamics around you and how confirmations begin to appear without your frantic solicitation. Another shift that becomes visible with practice is the refinement of emotional alchemy. The ability to transmute fear into fuel and doubt into curiosity is not a rare gift but a learned competency. Emotional alchemy means you do not spend energy suppressing sensations, you redirect them. When anxiety arises before an important conversation, for instance, you can welcome its physical signature and relabel it as excitement. This decision does not make the sensation vanish, it repurposes its trajectory. Over time your body learns new associations and the old automatic reactions lose their grip. You become literate in your inner climate, reading signals as information rather than threats. As this capacity grows, the world begins to move with less friction. Opportunities that required long negotiations before now resolve in a few clear conversations. Conversations that used to escalate into friction now land with nuance. The difference is not an external miracle, but the steady reconditioning of your nervous system and your habitual field. When your baseline shifts, the world mirrors that shift. What once required strenuous intervention now responds to your presence. Tests will still come. The universe uses friction as feedback. When you encounter a seeming setback, ask, what deeper level of your environment is being asked to align? Often the answer lies not in changing circumstances, but in refining the quality of your attention. Are you operating from fear, from scarcity, or from a calm, open expectation? Shift your attention and watch the contours of possibility rearrange. This is not magical thinking, it is practical recalibration. Your inner posture is the most useful instrument for steering outcomes. In relationships, a similar dynamic applies. People do not fall in love with someone who is chasing them. They are drawn to emotional dignities, those qualities that communicate composure, generosity, and a willingness to meet life with integrity. When you show up from that posture, you are not manipulating. You are simply presenting a stable ground on which healthy connections can form. This steadiness dismantles patterns of codependence and invites mutual responsibility. You give space for reciprocity, and that space becomes fertile. The practice of energetic clearing becomes routine and essential. Daily rituals that remove interference are as practical as brushing your teeth. Simple acts like breathing into the heart, speaking statements of receptivity, and visualizing tension dissolving become maintenance for your field. Without this upkeep, old patterns can resurface and create interference ripples that scatter momentum. Consistency in clearing is not an indulgence. It is the maintenance of an operating system that allows your intentions to move with clarity. Another essential refinement is learning to steward attention. Attention is the currency by which reality is negotiated. Where you place sustained attention, forms slowly emerge. Scattered attention dissipates potential. Consider how your day unfolds when pulled by reactive stimuli versus when guided by a few chosen intentions. The latter produces results because it concentrates energy. This is why a clear morning practice that sets the tone is so important. What you rehearse in the early hours becomes the gravitational center for the rest of the day. Surrender remains a practice that is easy to misunderstand. It is not passive resignation, it is an aligned letting go. Surrender means holding your vision with clarity while releasing the need to determine every detail of how it will unfold. It is a posture of confident openness rather than anxious control. Many confound surrender with laziness. The opposite is true. Surrender requires courage and a steady inner economy. It asks you to take responsibility for your own state while trusting wider intelligence to coordinate events beyond the narrow map of your planning. A useful test for whether you are surrendering from strength or from fear is the quality of your inner language. Are you saying, "I hope, I'll try," or "maybe"? Or are you stating, "I know, I trust, and I act from that confidence"? The difference is not vanity. It is alignment. Words that originate from an anchored field create more weight and therefore more movement. Language aligned with knowing shapes different results than language born of pleading. As your capacity to hold this field develops, you will notice that life begins to ask less of your energy in terms of struggle and more in terms of presence. Tasks become clearer, decisions simpler, and timing more cooperative. This does not guarantee comfort in every moment, but it does guarantee an increased capacity to move through discomfort without losing your center. The emotional elasticity you cultivate becomes the foundation of sustained momentum. Remember to celebrate small confirmations. When the day produces a ripple that confirms your recalibrated expectation, acknowledge it. Gratitude is not a passive nicety. It is a mechanism that aligns your attention with abundance. Noticing and appreciating the small wins amplifies the frequency you hold and invites more alignment. Gratitude functions as a feedback amplifier, turning microshifts into durable baseline changes. Finally, practice patience without resignation. Evolution of your inner field is a process of steady refinement. The tendency to expect dramatic overnight shifts is driven by cultural myths of instant success. Real change is often invisible until it becomes undeniable. The slow work compounds until you wake one morning and realize your life has shifted into a new register. When that day arrives, you will not be surprised. You will be composed and familiar with the cadence of your own field. As your practice deepens, you will encounter an unmistakable phenomenon. Moments that once felt like coincidence begin to reveal themselves as confirmations of an inner shift. Where before you saw separate events, you now perceive threads weaving together. This coherence is not accidental. It is a natural outcome when your inner architecture aligns with the pattern you intend to embody. Those threads show up as fortuitous meetings, timely conversations, or sudden openings that seem to arrive exactly when you need them. The field begins to answer the quality of attention you maintain, and you find yourself moving through life with a growing sense of orchestration rather than random chance. One man named Victor noticed this change after months of intentionally inhabiting the identity of his future self. Small adjustments, how he stood, how he spoke, how he held his gaze, shifted the way others responded. Invitations that had never been available showed up without force. The explanation was simple. Identity creates conditions. When you become the person who naturally attracts what you want, the environment realigns to support that version. This is the essence of the quantum jump. It is not a trick, but a practical consequence of consistent energetic adjustment. You step into a frequency, and the field reorganizes to accommodate the person who occupies it. These experiences often culminate in tests that refine the shape of your certainty. Leonard's business unraveling and subsequent reformation was one such test. In the midst of collapse, it would have been easy to revert to old habits of anxious bargaining and frantic problem-solving. Instead, he practiced steadiness. He treated the shock as a proving ground. Would he remain the person who already had what he sought, or would he default to fear? His choice to remain steady allowed new pathways to appear. The world often creates a crucible just before a breakthrough, not to defeat you, but to reveal whether your internal cup is truly full. Another recurring theme is the shift from accumulating proof to radiating presence. Beatrick had spent years collecting receipts of possibility, emails, endorsements, small wins she hoped would validate a larger truth. When she stopped needing evidence and instead lived from an embodied knowing, doors opened without the frantic compulsion to prove herself. Proof-seeking had been a strategy that masked insecurity. Embodied certainty dissolved the need. This does not mean you will never receive external praise. It simply means that praise becomes optional rather than essential. The difference is liberating because it frees your energy to create rather than to chase approval. Emotional alchemy grows more refined with repetition. Florence learned to rename fear as fuel and to direct its momentum toward action. This is not suppression but transformation. You will encounter sensations that once immobilized you and find they can be repurposed as signals for movement. The body begins to lose its old reflex patterns and learns new ones. Where panic once paralyzed, a practiced recalibration turns tension into forward motion. Over time, your emotional vocabulary expands and your capacity to respond creatively increases. This is the hallmark of growing maturity in the inner work. Presence also becomes a professional advantage. In business, when you act from a calm center, you negotiate different outcomes. People respond to composure because it communicates competence and trustworthiness. Leaders who cultivate presence do not dominate by force. They orient collectives by field. The decisions they make carry a different quality because they arise from a steady source. If you are building a career, practice showing up as someone who manages complexity without unraveling. Others will naturally seek your view and defer to your clarity. In intimate partnerships, the magnetism of completeness changes relational dynamics. Dorothy's experience is instructive. Once she shifted from clutching to generosity, relationships stopped feeling like territories to defend and became arenas for mutual growth. This dynamic invites reciprocity because you no longer use another person to fill a gap inside you. Instead, you offer your wholeness, and the other person is free to respond from their fullness. The quality of interactions deepens, and conflicts resolve differently because the stakes are no longer about survival but about expression. There will be moments when doubts re-emerge in subtle forms. Old narratives can surface under stress or fatigue. When that happens, do not interpret the return of familiar thoughts as failure. See them as an opportunity to gently redirect. Use the clearing practices you have developed: breath work, heart-centered visualization, simple statements of receptivity, to reset the baseline. The work of mastery is not eradication of thought, but the persistence of chosen posture. Each time you return to calm, you reinforce a new neural pathway and the habit strengthens. You will also learn to steward your attention with increasing finesse. Attention acts like a magnet. What you focus on expands. This principle is practical and pragmatic. If you orient your attention toward scarcity, you will amplify it. If you orient toward possibility and clear next steps, you create momentum. A practical habit is to begin each morning with a short ritual that sets your inner assumption for the day. This can be as simple as 3 deep breaths combined with a single declarative sentence. Today will be guided, supportive, and effective. Repeat it until the sentence registers not as hope, but as a felt stance. Surrender grows deeper too. At early stages, surrender may have felt like letting go of small things. As depth increases, surrender becomes a confident allowance for the unknown to arrange itself around your intention. This does not mean you passively wait for miracles. It means you actively maintain the inner signal while allowing the field to propose mechanisms beyond your limited imagination. The intelligence that moves the universe orchestrates details in ways your narrow plan could not foresee. Trusting that intelligence expands your capacity to participate creatively in outcomes you previously imagined you had to manage single-handedly. Gratitude becomes a calibrated practice with real leverage. Not the surface gratitude that glosses over discomfort, but a precise attention to confirmations. When something aligns, name it aloud. Gratitude trains your attention to recognize frequency matches and amplifies their effect. It acts as a feedback loop that shifts your baseline toward abundance. This is why small acknowledgments of alignment matter. They are the tendrils that pull your inner climate into stable orientation. As your field clarifies, You will also develop a taste for selective action. Not every task deserves equal energy. When your presence is clear, choose actions that carry leverage and decline those that drain. Efficiency becomes not a project of productivity, but an expression of energetic stewardship. High-leverage choices produce visible outcomes precisely because they are aligned with your reoriented baseline. Finally, remember that this path is not about perfection, it is about fidelity. Fidelity means consistent return to the chosen posture even when life pulls you elsewhere. It is the act of showing up again and again into the field you intend to hold. Over time, fidelity becomes effortless because your nervous system rewires and your environment begins to conform more readily. The accumulation of small, steady acts compounds into a life that feels less like survival and more like art. You stand now at the threshold of integration, where all the teachings meet and begin to form a single coherent life. The journey you have tracked through practice, surrender, identity shifts, and subtle rewiring culminates in a different relationship with time, desire, and responsibility. Mastery is not a trophy you hang on a wall, it is a living posture you inhabit. It changes how you wake, how you listen, how you choose, and how you respond when the unexpected arrives. The old reflex of scrambling will no longer feel necessary because your baseline has moved. You no longer need to press every moment into a shape that looks like success. Instead, you allow surfaces to form around an interior gravity that consistently draws what you intend. There will be days when the field still tests you. This is part of the refinement, not an indictment of your growth. Tests are calibrations sent to reveal whether your knowing is robust or brittle. When a relationship shifts, a contract falters, or a plan derails, ask not what went wrong but what deeper confidence is being invited. The universe, impartial and exact, offers these moments as clarifying lenses. If you respond from panic, you reinforce the old pattern. If you respond from steadiness, you confirm the new one. Each steady response compounds. Over time, the number of these acute recalibration moments decreases not because life stops changing but because your capacity to meet change with composure strengthens. The outer field reorganizes to reflect that inner fidelity. You have learned to translate sensations into information rather than imperative. The flutter in your stomach before a speech is not a threat to be extinguished but a resource to be redirected. The internal signals that once hijacked you now become weather reports that guide your choices. In this new literacy, you begin to recognize the difference between a sensation that requires action and one that requires relabeling. That discernment short-circuits old cycles of reactivity and opens new channels of creative response. As your nervous system learns these new associations, anxiety softens into kinetic curiosity and fear becomes a prompt to refine rather than retreat. Leadership becomes something different too. The leaders you will embody are less about constant direction and more about creating fields that hold others in alignment. People follow a presence because it offers clarity, not because it offers certainty. Certainty is a muscle you develop through repeated acts of composure. When you make decisions from that field, people sense steadiness and respond with trust. This trust is not automatically granted, it is earned by consistent practice of returning to your center. When your team senses that you can hold complexity without collapsing, they carry more weight, take greater risks, and show up with more initiative. The leadership you exercise becomes catalytic because it invites others into their own larger expression. Money, status, and external achievements will continue to appear, but they will feel different. They will be reflections rather than proofs. Where you once used accomplishments to stitch together a fragile identity, you now receive them as consequences of alignment. They are not the source of your worth, but the natural echo of a life ordered from an interior axis. This shift dissolves the frantic accumulation that once drove you and replaces it with the practice of stewardship. Resources become tools for expression and contribution rather than trophies to ward off insecurity. Your relationship with abundance transforms into a stewardship model. You manage resources with clear intention and generous impact, knowing each allocation is an act of alignment with a larger purpose. Intimacy evolves as well. Relationships formed from completeness rarely ossify into codependence. Partners who meet you now encounter a person who brings their fullness, which invites mutual generosity. Conflict becomes an instrument of refinement rather than a chance to prove worth. When both parties practice presence, conversations land with nuance and repair happens with agility. The magnetism you cultivate is not an instrument of manipulation, but an invitation to shared life that is freer, more honest, and more brave. This is the deep art of loving without distraction, to offer yourself fully and to allow the other to respond from their own center. Creativity thrives in this state because pressure no longer smothers innovation. When you create from a place of openness, ideas come unforced and collaborations find natural momentum. The nervousness that once chased originality away now becomes a channel for embodied curiosity. You begin to trust the generative process rather than trying to control every outcome. In this freedom, art, work, and play become expressions of presence and not frantic attempts to secure identity. The projects that stick are those that carry resonance rather than frantic ambition. The social field around you recalibrates. People begin to treat you differently not because you demand it, but because your energy has changed. Invitations that once felt like favors now arrive naturally. Opportunities you used to chase become offers that find you in the space you inhabit. This shift does not mean you receive everything you want automatically. Realities still require navigation, negotiation, and discernment. What changes is the baseline from which you operate. Your responses become more strategic because they originate from clarity rather than from urgent scarcity. You also learn to use language with precision because words are instruments that shape reality. Language born from doubt produces outcomes aligned with doubt. Language born from knowing calls forth corresponding conditions. Speak less to persuade and more to declare. Use phrases that carry the weight of your interior state. Not because you seek to bully the world into agreement, but because words that align with your being create coherence in your field. This is the ancient power of declaration. It is not mere rhetoric, but an energetic act that inaugurates. Practice the habit of aligning your inner state first, and then allow your language to match. When you do this, your words become effective conveyors of the reality you hold. Routine matters, but it is the quality of your routines that now holds the secret. A morning ritual is effective not because of its components but because it signals your field into a certain register. 10 minutes of stillness anchored in real feeling will wash through your day more than an hour of anxious planning. Choose practices that root you in the posture you intend to maintain. Keep the rituals simple and repeatable so they become muscle memory. Over time they become less an exercise and more a calibration. They are the small daily acts by which you continue to rewire your nervous system and refine your baseline. Humility remains crucial. The deeper you grow, the more aware you become of how much you do not know. This humility is not a liability, but a strength because it keeps you teachable. Real mastery is dynamic, an ongoing willingness to be corrected and to refine. When you hold power with humility, you avoid the trap of brittle certainty. You can remain both confident and open, which makes you more effective and less isolated. Teach others by demonstration rather than by justification. The best teaching is lived presence. When your life reflects the principles you espouse, people sense an authenticity that no argument can produce. You cannot give your knowing to someone, but you can model what is possible. Be generous with demonstration and patient with the process others must travel. Each person learns at their own pace. Your role is to illuminate rather than to push. Finally, remember that mastery is a horizon rather than a destination. There will always be deeper levels of refinement, subtler calibrations to make, and broader territories of expression to explore. Embrace that infinite openness as an invitation to curiosity rather than a source of anxiety. Each season of growth adds texture to your life. None of it negates what came before. Celebrate the fact that you have moved from seeking into being, from bargaining into receiving, and from acting out of scarcity into stewarding abundance. As this work ripples outward, let your use of influence be ethical and kind. Power is not neutral. It is an energy that reshapes other people's lives. Place integrity at the center of your influence. Use your access to uplift, support, and create structures that allow others to flourish. The true measure of your mastery is not how much you accumulate, but how generously you enable others to remember their own power. Close this chapter of your practice by sitting in silence and feeling the shift that has occurred. Rest your hand on your heart and acknowledge the movement from who you once were into whom you have become. Offer gratitude to the small practices that retooled your day-to-day life and to the tests that proved your mettle. Take a breath and claim the final line of this passage as a lived reality. You will never be the same again.